You don't choose to become the most feared debt collector in the Yakuza. You become one because the universe decided your life was a ledger that needed to be balanced in blood. You're born in Kamagasaki, Osaka's forgotten district, a place the tourism brochures pretend doesn't exist. The streets smell like cheap shochu and broken promises. Your father was a day laborer who gambled every yen he earned at underground pachinko parlors. Your mother worked at a toy until her looks expired, and the mama-san replaced her with a younger model. That's how human resources works in the entertainment district. No severance package, just severance. By the time you're 8 years old, you've mastered 3 skills. How to cook rice with nothing but water and desperation. How to dodge a drunk man's fist in a 6-tatami mat apartment. And how to count money faster than any kid in your school. That 3rd skill is the one that ruins your life. Your father's gambling debt is legendary in the neighborhood. Not because of the amount, but because of who he owes it to. The Yamaguchi-gumi's local syndicate. 30 million yen. To any normal family, that number is a death sentence. To your father, it's just a Tuesday. He promises he'll pay it back. He always promises. The men in dark suits who visit your apartment every month aren't interested in promises. They're interested in principal plus interest, compounding weekly at rates that would make a credit card company blush. One night, they stop being polite. They don't touch your father. That would be too simple. Instead, they sit down at your kitchen table, pour themselves tea like they own the place, and calmly explain to your mother that if the debt isn't settled by month's end, they'll be taking the apartment, not evicting you. Taking the physical structure, walls, floor, roof. They'll strip it for materials and leave your family sitting in an empty concrete shell. Your mother cries. Your father stares at the floor. You, a 9-year-old boy sitting in the corner pretending to do homework, memorize every detail. The way they fold their hands. The way they speak softly but leave, and it becomes the foundation of everything you'll eventually become. Your father does what cowards do. He disappears. No note, no forwarding address, no dramatic goodbye. Just an empty futon and a closet missing his only good jacket. He doesn't even take his shoes, which tells you he planned this in advance, and bought new ones with money he should have been using to pay his debt. Your mother, now solely responsible for a 30 million yen liability she didn't create, does the only thing she can. She walks into the local syndicate office and offers the one asset she has left. You. Not to be hurt. To work. She negotiates with the precision of a woman who has absolutely nothing to lose. She tells them her son is smart, obedient, and good with numbers. She proposes that you work for the syndicate to pay down the debt. It's indentured servitude with Japanese characteristics. The oyabun, the local boss, looks at this skinny kid with oversized glasses and sees something nobody else does. Potential return on investment. He agrees. Your debt repayment plan officially begins. Interest rate? 40% monthly. Estimated payoff date? Never. Welcome to your first job. They start you at the bottom. You're a runner. You carry envelopes between offices, deliver messages, pick up packages from businesses that pay protection fees. They call it greeting duty. You call it what it is, a 9-year-old operating as a logistics courier for organized crime. But you're smart enough to keep that observation to yourself. Your immediate supervisor is a mid-level enforcer named Tanaka. He's missing the tip of his left pinky, which in the Yakuza is the standard receipt for a past failure. He looks at you with a mixture of pity and amusement. He tells you 3 rules on your first day. Never steal from the family, never disrespect a superior, and never, under any circumstances, show fear to a debtor. Fear is a virus, he explains. If they see it in your eyes, it spreads to their spine, and suddenly the person who owes you money thinks they have options. Your job is to make sure they never feel that way. By 12, you've graduated from runner to apprentice collector. Tanaka takes you on rounds, like a doctor taking a medical student through a hospital. Except the patients owe money instead of needing treatment. And the prognosis is always the same. Pay or suffer. Your first real collection is a small business owner in Shinsekai, who borrowed 2 million yen to open a takoyaki stand. The business failed because his recipe was terrible and his location was worse. He's 3 months behind on payments. Tanaka tells you to handle the conversation. You're terrified, but you remember Rule 3. You sit across from this man, who is twice your age and 3 times your size. You open his file. You read the numbers out loud. Principal, interest, penalties, total owed. You don't raise your voice. You don't threaten. You just let the math do the violence. The man starts sweating. He offers partial payment. You tell him partial payment is acceptable, but the remaining balance accrues a late fee of 15%. Compounding. You explain this the way a bank teller would explain an overdraft charge, politely, professionally, and with the unspoken understanding that the consequences of non-compliance are significantly worse than a ding on his credit score. He pays in full the next day. Tanaka watches the whole thing and nods. He tells the oyabun that the kid is a natural. The oyabun raises an eyebrow and says something that seals your fate. Promote him. He's not a collector. He's an accountant who makes house calls. By 16, you've developed a reputation. They call you the calculator. Not because of your math skills, although those are exceptional, but because you calculate the exact psychological pressure needed for each debtor. You've learned that debt collection isn't about violence. Violence is expensive, messy, and attracts police attention. Debt collection is about architecture. You build a structure of fear so precise that the debtor dismantles themselves. You study each target before visiting. You learn their routines, their families, their pressure points. A restaurant owner with a daughter in private school doesn't need to be threatened with physical harm. He needs to be reminded, gently, that tuition payments require a stable income, and stable income requires a functioning restaurant, and a functioning restaurant requires windows that aren't shattered at 3 in the morning. You never say you'll break the windows. You just talk about how fragile glass is in this neighborhood. The implication does the work. The beauty of implication is that it's not technically a crime. You can't arrest someone for discussing the structural integrity of commercial glass. At 19, you handle your first high-value case. A real estate developer in Umeda borrowed 800 million yen from the syndicate to finance a luxury condo project. The project collapsed when his permits got revoked. He's defaulting on the biggest loan your branch has ever issued. The oyabun personally assigns you. This is your final exam. The developer is a different breed from the takoyaki vendors and small-time gamblers. He has lawyers, accountants, and a security team. He thinks his corporate infrastructure makes him untouchable. He's wrong. You don't visit his office. You don't call his phone. Instead, you spend 3 weeks mapping his entire financial ecosystem. You discover his wife's family owns a chain of ryokans in Kyoto, traditional inns that depend entirely on reputation and online reviews. You discover his son is applying to Tokyo University's law program, where any hint of criminal association would be an automatic disqualification. You discover his mistress has an apartment in Shinsaibashi that's registered under a shell company tied to the same accounts he used for the syndicate loan. You compile everything into a neat folder. Then you request a meeting. Not at his office. At a quiet tea house in Nakanoshima. Neutral ground. He arrives with 2 bodyguards. You arrive alone. You set the folder on the table and slide it across. You don't open it. You just let it sit there. You tell him the contents are a comprehensive audit of his financial exposure. You explain, in the same tone a consultant would use during a board presentation, that the syndicate values its business relationships and prefers collaborative solutions. You suggest a restructured payment plan, 60 monthly installments, reduced interest, collateralized against the ryokan chain. If he accepts, the folder stays closed. If he doesn't, the folder opens, and its contents reach his wife, his son's admissions committee, and the Kyoto Tourism Board. Simultaneously, he stares at the folder like it's a bomb, which, in a sense, it is. He signs the restructured agreement before his tea gets cold. You walk out of that meeting, and the oyabun calls you personally for the first time. He says 4 words. You're management now. Management means a new office, a crew of 6 collectors who report to you, and access to the syndicate's full client ledger. The numbers are staggering. Your branch alone manages over 12 billion yen in outstanding receivables across 400 active accounts. It's a mid-sized financial institution, except the compliance department carries katanas, and the customer service line ends with a hospital visit. You systematize everything. You create risk profiles for each debtor. You categorize them by repayment, probability, asset exposure, and psychological vulnerability. You implement a tiered collection strategy. Tier 1 is polite reminders. Tier 2 is financial pressure. Tier 3 is social pressure. Tier 4 is physical intimidation. Used only as a last resort because it's the least efficient method with the highest operational risk. Your collection rate hits 94% within the first year. The previous manager achieved 61. The Oyabun starts sending other branch managers to study your methods. You're 23 years old, and you've essentially invented a management consulting framework for organized crime. McKinsey with missing pinkies. But efficiency has a cost that doesn't show up on the balance sheet. You start seeing the faces. Not in your waking hours, those are too busy for reflection. In your sleep. The takoyaki vendor whose wife left him after you garnished his income. The school teacher who borrowed money for her mother's surgery and now works 3 jobs to meet your payment schedule. The college student who took a loan for tuition and dropped out when you explained the consequences of default. These people aren't criminals. They're desperate humans who made the mistake of needing money in a world where banks don't lend to people who actually need it. The Yakuza fills the gap that legitimate finance refuses to touch, and you're the collection agent who ensures the gap stays profitable. You tell yourself you're just doing math. You tell yourself the debt existed before you arrived and would exist after you left. You tell yourself you're a professional, performing a function, like a surgeon who can't afford to think about the person attached to the organ. But surgeons save lives. You just extract value from them until there's nothing left. At 25, you get the case that breaks something inside you that you didn't know was still intact. A widow in Tennoji. Her husband was a mid-level Yakuza associate who died during a territorial dispute. Standard workplace accident in this industry. He left behind an 18 million yen debt and a 14-year-old daughter. The syndicate's policy on inherited debt is simple. Blood doesn't erase ink. The obligation transfers to the next of kin. You visit the apartment. It's small, clean, and heartbreakingly organized. The woman has arranged her husband's photo on a shelf next to a bowl of fresh rice and a stick of incense. The daughter is doing homework at the kitchen table. She looks up when you walk in. She doesn't look scared. She looks resigned, like she's been expecting you, which means her mother already told her what happens when the men in suits come to visit. You sit down, you open the file, you start reading the numbers, and then you stop. Because the daughter's textbook is open to a math page, and she's solving equations that are more advanced than anything you studied at her age. She's solving them correctly. You look at this girl and you see yourself 15 years ago. A kid with talent, sitting in a room while adults negotiate the price of a future she didn't choose. You close the file. You tell the widow you'll restructure the payment at 0 interest with a 10-year term. This is a decision that is so far outside your authority that it might as well be treason. You walk out and you don't report the visit to anyone. The Oyabun finds out within a week, because of course he does. Nothing happens in this organization without the boss knowing. He calls you in. He doesn't yell. He never yells. He just sits across from you in his wood-paneled office and asks a question that has only one right answer. Are you losing your edge? You tell him no. You tell him the restructured deal maximizes long-term recovery from a low-value account. You frame mercy as strategy, because in this organization, compassion without justification is weakness. And weakness is a resignation letter, written in your own blood. He stares at you for a long time. Then he nods. But you see something shift behind his eyes. A note has been made. A flag has been planted. You've just learned the most important lesson in the Yakuza. You can be feared, respected, and even admired. But the moment they suspect your loyalty to the numbers has been compromised by something as inconvenient as a conscience, your employee evaluation takes a very different direction. You start making plans. Not dramatic escape plans, quiet ones. You've been skimming, not money, information. For years, you've maintained meticulous records of every transaction, every collection, every bribe paid to every police officer and politician. You stored it as insurance, the same way every smart Yakuza member does. But now you're considering using it not as a shield, but as a ticket out. You contact a prosecutor in Tokyo through a chain of intermediaries so long it would take a forensic team 6 months to trace. You offer everything: account structures, leadership hierarchy, money laundering routes, political connections. In exchange, you want 2 things: witness protection for yourself and your mother, and the cancellation of every debt in your branch's ledger. 400 families freed with the stroke of a prosecutorial pen. The prosecutor agrees in principle. The operation is set for 3 months out. But the Yakuza didn't survive for over a century by being careless. Tanaka, your old mentor, the man who taught you rule number 3, notices something.
He can't explain what exactly. He just says your energy is different. In the Yakuza, intuition is a more reliable surveillance system than any camera. He reports his concerns up the chain. The Oyabun orders a quiet audit of your recent activities. You don't know any of this. You're too busy planning your exit to notice the walls closing in. The call comes at 2 in the morning. Not from the prosecutor, from Tanaka. His voice is flat, which is worse than angry. He tells you the Oyabun knows. Not everything, but enough. He tells you to run. Now. Tonight. He's giving you a head start because of what you meant to him. But that head start has an expiration date measured in hours, not days. You ask him why he's helping you. He's quiet for a moment. Then he says something that guts you. Because I recruited a smart kid, and I'm not going to watch them turn him into a cautionary tale. My pinky was enough of a lesson for one lifetime. You grab the hard drive with every file, every transaction, every name. You take one bag. You leave your apartment in Dotonbori for the last time. The neon reflects off the canal. And for a moment, Osaka looks beautiful in a way you never allowed yourself to notice. Because beauty is a distraction, and distractions in this business get you killed. You make it to the train station. The Shinkansen to Tokyo leaves in 40 minutes. You buy the ticket with cash. You sit on the platform. And for the first time in 16 years, you feel something you barely recognize. Hope. Which is exactly when everything collapses. 3 men step onto the platform from different entrances. They're not wearing suits. They're dressed like commuters, which makes it worse, because it means the syndicate sent professionals, not enforcers. These are the men they deploy when the job needs to look like an accident. A fall onto the tracks, a heart attack on the platform, an unfortunate stumble. You spot them because you trained yourself to see what others miss. You have about 90 seconds before they close the distance. You don't run. Running on a train platform triggers station security cameras and alerts bystanders. Instead, you walk, calmly, toward the south exit. You pass a vending machine, drop the hard drive into a coin locker, and pocket the key. If they catch you, the evidence survives. You push through the exit doors into the Osaka night. Behind you, footsteps quicken. You turn a corner into Shinsekai, the neon jungle where you grew up. These streets are your operating system. You know every alley, every shortcut, every gap between buildings that only a body your size can squeeze through. You vanish into the maze, like a coin dropping into a pachinko machine. They lose you within 4 blocks. You make it to a safe house, a capsule hotel in Namba, where you registered under a name that doesn't exist. You lie in that tiny plastic coffin of a room and stare at the ceiling 6 inches from your face. You think about the takoyaki vendor. You think about the school teacher. You think about the widow and her daughter. You think about your mother, who sold you to pay a debt she didn't create. You think about your father, who created the debt and disappeared. You think about Tanaka, who taught you how to destroy people's lives and then risked his own to save yours. And you think about the coin locker key in your pocket. That key is a detonator. 1 call to the prosecutor and 12 billion yen in syndicate operations collapses. 400 families walk free. But you go to prison because witness protection doesn't erase the things you've done, the people you've crushed, the lives you've itemized and liquidated like assets on a closing balance sheet. You pull out the key and hold it up in the pale blue light of the capsule. Such a small thing. A piece of stamped metal worth about 50 yen. But what's behind it could dismantle an empire and free 400 families from the same trap that swallowed you when you were 9 years old.
And that's when the final irony hits you so hard it almost makes you laugh. You've spent your entire life collecting debts. Every door you knocked on, every file you opened, every family you sat across from, and explained the mathematics of their suffering. You were the system, the machine that turns desperation into revenue. And now, lying in a plastic box in Namba, holding a coin locker key like it's the last prayer bead on a broken rosary, you realize the debt you could never collect was your own. Your father's 30 million yen. The original sin. The number that started everything. It was never paid off. It was just redistributed across 16 years and 400 families who had nothing to do with it. Every yen you collected was just the compounding interest on a broke gambler's bar tab. You were never the collector. You were the debt. That wraps it up for today. The story you just heard is fiction, but somewhere in Osaka right now, a kid with a talent for numbers is sitting in a room while adults negotiate a price for his future. If this one hit you different, drop a comment and tell me which moment stayed with you. I've got more deep dives like this coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next one.